Welcome to the final session before afternoon tea. We've got Michylla Seale, who will be talking to us about the biosecurity plans and traceability for WA sheep producers. For those of you who have not met her, she is a vet with 20 years of experience across Australia and internationally, mostly focusing on AI services. And she's got a bad draw today, biosecurity and traceability. Bit of a tough one, so let's see what she can do with it. Please help me welcome Mick to the stage.
Thanks for having me, guys. So I'll try and get a good spin on biosecurity and traceability, which is sometimes a difficult task because a lot of people feel like it's being pushed down our throats a bit. So what are our main drivers with biosecurity and traceability? One of the key ones is our market access. We have a great reputation of a quality, safe product, and we want to maintain that, okay, with our trading partners. The other thing is our agricultural industry. Again, we are very lucky where we are in Australia of our isolation and our island status, that we can maintain our borders very well. So it gives us a good opportunity to maintain our biosecurity of our whole agricultural industry. But we also need to consider it about at the farm level, not only from exotic diseases, but endemic diseases that are here, okay? The other part is our consumers. The consumers have a lot of trust in us that we're producing a good quality product. But we also, to maintain that, we need to give them those assurances. They want to know where their product's coming from, and there's a growing demand to have traceability right back to that farm gate. And you're even seeing it now in Europe where some woolen products, they're actually getting them on the tag exactly where they've come from. So there's that increasing demand from our consumers as well. So we really want to keep Australia safe and free. If foot and mouth disease came here, they've done some studies on what it would cost. And we are looking at, you could be looking at it's hard to judge, but it can depend on how our trading partners react, which we don't know, and how big that incursion would be. But we could be looking over a 10-year period of it costing us $51 billion. And that's not including the costs of trying to control it within Australia. So exotic diseases, it's a statement that came out recently from the Chief Veterinary Officer, Mark Shipp, was it's not if, it's when. And he projected that there's a 42% chance that in the next 5 years we're going to have something arrive within Australia. And I've put up a couple of examples here of within Australia and overseas. In 2019, I think it was, in South Africa had foot and mouth disease. China imports 71% of their wool, and they just completely banned all the imports. And that was a cost of, I think, around $300 million to the producers there. And then through 2020, it started to impact the beef imports from South Africa into China. At our borders, with what they're detecting, there's been huge amounts of detecting of African swine fever and foot and mouth disease in meat products that they've stopped at the borders, which has the potential to put us at risk. There was also a case, I think July this year, where people were charged with doing fraudulent documents for bringing in products that contained milk, which is a risk for foot and mouth disease to Australia. And lucky that was detected and found, because that is another risk. So we can see that there's the potential of these risks out there. They have increased the penalties for not declaring as people come in, but I think the penalties went from about $450 for not declaring to $2,500. But you look at what that potential cost could be to our whole industry is huge. It's the responsibility of all of us. It's not just only us, the producers and industry, it's government and also the consumers as well. So we all need to band together to make sure that we've got a robust system to not only protect our industry, but also your farm as well. So what can we do? It starts before your farm gate, and the first step is just to have a plan. It doesn't need to be complicated. Just having a plan in place is there, and that is to protect your enterprise, okay? It can be quick and simple and easy. Hopefully this plays. The Farm Biosecurity website has a great resource and makes it quite simple and easy to set up a self-assessment of a biosecurity plan, and it goes through. You can select what stock you have and what your enterprise, and it's got easy access tools that you can go through to do your own self-assessment. You don't need to take it as a fail or anything like that. Just do it to see where you may think you want to make improvements or you don't. It doesn't need to be complicated, and it's more to stimulate you thinking also about that plan. Okay? So at this website, you can download it and just go through and complete it with yes and no. And like I said, don't take a no as a failure. Take a no as thinking, well, do I want to concentrate on that? Is that something that's going to affect my business? And it doesn't matter what the scale of your enterprise is. I think it's really important to be considering those and going through it. And after you've completed it, make sure the rest of your team are fully aware of what your plan is and in place, because there's no point just you knowing, the whole team has to know. Keep a copy of it, okay, so it's easy access. A lot of with your LPA and reviews and sustainability programs, there's a lot to do that you need to have a biosecurity plan as well when you're audited for those. And review it annually. Your production, your system changes. So as time goes on, you will need to consider changing that plan. It maybe take something out or include something. Just over time, review it and change. Okay, kind of concentrate a bit more directly on the stock now. So how do we assess your risk? So it's a bit like the G2G pass. Sorry, using the COVID analogies here. But you need the information to assess whether they're good to go to come on your property. So we are all aware of the NVD, but we don't see a lot of people asking for the National Sheep Health Statement. And it's something that I think gives you that extra information to assess whether you want to say those sheep are good to go to come onto your property. It's a legally binding document, and if something's missing from there, it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, what about this and that? So you can assess your risk. Okay, a lot of our producers, we do buy from known, reliable sources, but I had a questioner when I was on farm the other day. They asked me going about brucellosis, and they said, well, I buy from brucellosis flocks, and how do I know they are? I just assume they are. And I said, well, for one, ask where you're buying them from, and two, ask for the sheep health statement, and then you can and then if they're not Brucel accredited, you can ask other questions there, whether they're tested or what their biosecurity plan is in regard to that. Okay. So I was just going to go a bit more into, I'm interested, has anyone used the National Sheep Health Declaration? Yeah, a few hands, but I tend to find we get this proportion of hands go up generally. Not a lot of people are asking for it. It allows you to... I've seen a lot of issues over time where if producers had got one of these sheep health declarations, they would have been able to know what they were getting or make that decision not to let them come on their property. Foot rot for one. Foot rot, it can be quite difficult because we don't have a national system for it, and there is differences between states. But I've seen a lot of issues where people have had foot rot from the eastern states where they have never got the sheep health statement. They're meant to go through those checks and sign it off at the border, but we've still had positives come up. Okay, brucellosis, which I've already covered on, because by the time you detect it, if you're just buying not knowing, it can be quite far down the track, and your conception rates have been drastically reduced, and also the cost of, because there's no treatment, it's a cull, test and cull. And a lot of times, the proportion that are affected, the economics of it, it's actually far better off just to get rid of all of the rams, and that can cost you a fortune. The other one is OJD. okay? It lets you know, are they vaccinated? Are they from a test property? My personal opinion, I like the assurance of a vaccine, I think, personally, because for the testing and that, we need a certain proportion of the flock affected before we've got confidence in those test results. So it allows you to know whether they are or not. Also, parasite treatments, external and internal, and their vaccination history. I had an example where I was investigating an issue with a client with sheep that they'd bought in, and one of the first things I was asking was their vaccination history. And I don't know, I'm not too sure. And even with your parasites, you can know when they were treated and what products they were treated with. So let's say now that you've got this information from the clients, you've got your MVD and your sheep health declaration. Now you're saying they're good to go, but it's also like when we come through back into the state. We've already got that good to go, but we're still checked at the border. We get our temperature taken. So you've got to do the same thing with your stock. Inspect them. So when they arrive, are they laying? Have a feel of their testicles. I had an example of a client that purchased rams, and I was recently in just investigating a low conception rate, and I went through his rams and they were negative for brucellosis. I did test them for that, but the amount of abnormalities in these rams, they were long-term. They didn't just happen, okay? And that cost them, I think we worked out, in $60,000 in lost lambs this year. So that's a huge cost. So if he'd got in, had a feel, we could have avoided that, okay? The other thing, is there pooled wool? Do we need to consider lice? And those kind of things. The other thing is treatments, okay? The vaccination history. Have they been vaccinated before? What with? If they're ewes that are under 2 years of age and you're going to maintain them for breeding ewes, they're not vaccinated for OJD, you may want to vaccinate them to give them that longevity. It may not eliminate the disease, but it can in some animals slow down the progression and reduce the amount that they're shedding in the environment. So that's a consideration. One of the biggest ones you want to do at this stage is a quarantine drench, okay, with multiple actives, okay? Just to make sure, the last thing you want to do is introduce resistant worms onto your property, okay? It can cost you a fortune, and one of our biggest costs is with worm resistance. Okay, where after they're drenched, you really want to keep them contained for no less than 1 day in an area, just so that any of those eggs can flow out and they're not contaminating your pastures. Ideally, you do want to monitor them and keep them contained for 21 days. It's not always feasible in every situation, but I'd say a minimum 7 at the very least. Just so that if anything pops up, okay, you've got time to react before it's affecting your whole enterprise. And the other one that you can also do is do a drench check also 10 to 14 days after you've done that quarantine drench to see if there is any resistance there, if you get any egg counts there. When you release them from quarantine, put them out into a paddock that has been grazed by your sheep, so we're diluting those worms as well, is another consideration. One of the big things that we often forget about is sheep that have gone on agistment. You've got to treat them like they've gone completely off your property and they're new introductions. I've seen issues come up with those before. The other one is strays. I really recommend you communicate with your neighbour and have a plan for what you're going to do with strays. I've seen issues pop up where they're just put back and a foot rot has come up down the track because they weren't inspected. Brucellosis by just shooting the ram rather than maybe feeling his testicles or getting him tested. And it won't show up until quite down the track, and it's cost you a lot of money. The whole point of doing this is we want to be able to not have an incursion that's going to cost you a lot of money, restrict your trade access, and cost you a lot of money in regulations as well. So important. So just quickly, the other considerations to consider with your biosecurity is people coming in onto your property. We can hold foot and mouth disease in our nose for up to 24 hours. So, I mean, we're lucky where we are in Australia that we're far away, and usually from those places we're longer than a 24 hours, but that's, you know, people are a risk coming on. Do people wash down? Do you wash down vehicles? Not let people drive their vehicles through your paddocks and your properties. The other thing is getting rid of carcasses because of the feral animals and how they can scavenge. The other big thing here is sheep measles, okay? Having your foxes and wild dogs can also carry it, and the condemnation and the trimmings can cost a lot through the abattoirs there. I think in some cases it can be up to cost the abattoirs about $4,000 a day in trimmings and that there, which again can affect that. So having a plan with your neighbours with vermin control, which a lot of areas do, because they can cost you a lot of money. So it's not only the animals that are coming into your property, the other part is the animals that are going off our property. Making sure that, for one, they're identified correctly for traceability. So if they're bought-in animals, they've got the pink tag. The other one is that there's got no signs of disease or illness or anything like that, and they meet that fit-to-load requirements, okay? Now, with our surveillance and records, it's really important that we keep records for this. Train your staff so that they know what diseases and pests and that are of concern to you and that you think are a big risk within your environment. And be aware of those in the area or where you're purchasing stock from that may be a risk to your business. And if you've got concerns, ring someone beforehand, okay? Keep records of movements like we do, and if you think there are any issues or anything like that, ring the hotlines for an emergency animal disease, but communicate with your local advisor, your vet, if there's anything that comes up of a concern. I'd hate someone to see the pictures sometimes that people flick through to on my phone, clients all over, they'll just take a picture, send through, do I need to be concerned, do I need to be worried? It's a quick 5-minute thing, and then it makes them relax and be, okay, yeah, not a concern, or, okay, I might need to do something about this. But it's quick and easy, reach out there. Okay, and use the information. I was just going to put up the Animal Health Australia, where you get the information from your kill sheets. It's a great resource where you can have a look at the common things that come up through the abattoirs that cause trimmings and losses. And then there's great information sheets and access that you can access through that website. Okay, traceability. So again, this is so important to maintain our markets. A lot of people may have seen that sheep meat traceability report that came out earlier this year. It was in the media, I think leaked initially, where they traced animals from, I think, 7 abattoirs from the eastern states. I think it was about 2,700 animals. There was animals that were traced back to WA, and they found that with our non-EID tags, they were 70% traceable, and with EIDs they were 99%. So there was a real push then that they came forward with their recommendations of having a national system for all animals that can get foot and mouth disease. Now, one of the big things was an improvement on the database. I'm interested if anyone's used the NLS database before. If you're not cattle and have used it, it is clunky and it's old and frustrating at times. Their other thing was mandating EIDs, but all this comes at a cost. And so their other recommendation was having the cost of what is it going to cost industry and who's going to fund it and what does that funding need to be to establish it and maintain it. My concern is it's going to end up costing industry a lot of money, okay? So what can we do to make sure that we're doing the right things ourselves? For number one, make sure we're using our correct identification. We still see a lot of animals that aren't correctly identified, and that is sometimes a lot of our pitfall. We're very lucky in WA in terms of our tagging system. Not all the other states have it like us, with Pacific ears for the sex and Pacific colours for different age groups, okay? And just make sure we're doing it correctly. Make sure we're doing our MVDs correctly. And the private sales is one of the big things where we don't get that data capture within the NLS database. It's actually the responsibility of the person receiving those animals to put it into the database, and we don't capture all that information. But my personal opinion is we need something where it's happening without us even knowing it's happening. We all do our MVDs. We kind of need that system to come through, because I know when we've got rams coming in left, right and centre through our centre, we've got to take that extra time because we do all the entries for our clients, for them coming to us and leaving. But I can understand going home, you get other jobs, you get distracted, you have every intention of doing it, but we're all time poor. We're missing out on that time, that extra step to go into a clunky, awful database, very difficult database makes it very difficult to want to sit down and do it. Okay. Now, just quickly, there's a few new apps and tagging and new technologies out there to hopefully make traceability a bit better. AxiChain have an MVD that you can do online and offline, down on your phone, down at the yards. You then sign it, the truckie then signs it, and then they get a QR code, and that is accepted by the police in WA and Australia. And then also it gets emailed through to the end receiver as well. So, and they're looking at integrating that within the NLS database to take out that extra step that we have to do. There's a lot of the smart tags with GPS location, and also a lot of data about those animals as well, health, grazing and all those kind of things. But again, some of those tags, I think I've heard some of the GPS ones are higher, or some of the smarter tags, with all the health information could be up to $50, which I personally don't see people investing in. I mean, it's hard enough to get us to spend $2 or $1.50 to $2 on an electronic tag. So I just don't personally see that. They've been doing some retinal scanning on cattle for traceability, again, and also facial recognition, a lot of that with lambing, mothering up and those kind of things. But there's a lot of new technology, so we don't know where we will end up in the future. So thank you for listening to everyone, but these are my key take-home messages. Just have a simple plan and get yourself thinking about it. Correctly identify your animals. Start asking for the sheep health declaration. I think it's really important to be able to assess our risks. The NLS database, those non-sale yard movements are a big one that we're not collecting within it. There's no system that's without its flaws. We lose EIDs and, everything, nothing is without its flaws. But if we can try and do as much as we can improve that traceability. And one of the biggest things I think is inspecting stock on arrival. A lot of our studs will actually come to us, and if they're buying in new rams, they'll just quickly pop in if they're not too bad or not too far away, or we're driving past to say, hey, look, can you have a quick look? Or can you do a quick brucellosis test, even if they're from accredited, just to make sure they're maintaining their biosecurity for their clients. Okay. And so thank you, everyone.